Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the hardest truths you'll ever face, the truth that no one is coming to rescue you. No one is staying up at night thinking about your pain, and no one is obligated to care. At first, that realization cuts like ice. It feels like rejection, like abandonment, like proof that you're invisible. But what if I told you that this is the very moment where everything changes? What if I told you that buried inside that silence is the key to unshakable freedom and power? Listen carefully, because this is not just philosophy. This is survival. Most people spend their lives hoping the world will notice their suffering, waiting for the call, the text, the applause that never comes. They keep freezing their growth in the hope that someone else will give them permission to move forward. And that waiting, it kills more dreams than failure ever could. Tonight, we're going to flip that script. We're going to explore how the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus faced the exact same reality and turned it into strength. They didn't crumble because the world was indifferent. They built their empires in spite of it. Think about it: when you stop expecting care, when you stop begging to be understood, you unlock a strange, rare kind of power. You no longer live reactively. You no longer collapse when the applause stops. You stop performing and start becoming. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about becoming grounded. It's about learning that solitude isn't loneliness. It's preparation. That rejection isn't proof of your unworthiness. It's redirection. That silence isn't abandonment. It's clarity. And if you can hold that truth, if you can accept that the world may never clap, never praise, never even notice, you become free. Free to act without permission. Free to grow without validation. Free to build a life so strong that it doesn't need an audience. That's the paradox. The moment you stop waiting for someone to care is the moment you begin to create something unforgettable. So tonight, don't just listen, lean in. Let these words become a mirror, a spark, a shift inside you. Because this is where your real life begins. Now, dim the lights, and let's embark on a journey. The quiet realization. No one is coming. There comes a moment, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow, when you realize a truth that feels almost unbearable. At first, no one is coming to rescue you. It's not cinematic. No music swells in the background. No audience claps. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like silence. A silence so heavy it seeps into your bones. You wait for the phone to buzz, for the door to open, for anyone to look at you and say, "Hannah, I see you. I understand." But it doesn't happen. And in that absence, a strange and ancient thing begins to stir inside you: strength. The Stoics knew this long before we ever put words to it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who carried an empire on his shoulders, wrote in his Meditations, "Do not waste the remainder of your life in speculation about others. It is not given to you to direct them." What he meant was simple: don't anchor your worth, your stability, your very life, in the hope that someone else will come and carry your burdens, because they won't. And that's not cruelty, that's reality. From childhood, we're raised with a quiet fantasy: if I hurt enough, someone will notice. If I cry loud enough, someone will save me. It's built into fairy tales, into the way adults soothe us, into the way we're told the world works. But life exposes the cracks. You cry, and the phone stays silent. You struggle, and the crowd walks by. not because they're heartless, but because they're drowning in their own chaos. Everyone is fighting battles invisible to the eye. Think about it. How often do you replay someone else's silent suffering in your head at night? Rarely. You're too consumed by your own worries, deadlines, bills, anxieties, heartbreaks. And that's the human condition. We are each the main character in our own story. And everyone else is a side note. Painful, yes, but liberating once you accept it. Because when you stop expecting the world to rush in, when you finally release the illusion that people owe you recognition, you stop waiting. You stop freezing your life in the hope that someone will notice your stuckness, and you start moving for yourself, not for applause. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." But here's the unspoken truth: most people don't ask because they care. They ask because they need to fit you into a box. They don't see you, they see their idea of you. Think of social media. When someone asks, "Who are you?" what they really mean is, "How can I label you? How can I categorize you into my scrolling feed, my worldview, my story?" And when you define yourself by how others label you, you don't live, you perform. You become a character in their narrative, rather than the author of your own. The Stoic answer: stop performing, start becoming. Epictetus said it bluntly: don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Don't wait for the world to ask who you are. Show them through action, through discipline, through the quiet power of self-respect. There is sorrow in realizing you're not the main character in anyone's story, but your own. At first, it feels like rejection, but it's actually gravity. No one is required to hold your hand through the fog. No one owes you applause for enduring hardship. Life does not hand out medals for suffering, and yet this is where the real transformation begins. When the hope of being saved dies, your real life begins. Modern example. Think of J.K. Rowling before Harry Potter. Rejected by 12 publishers, broke, raising a child alone. Nobody cared about her story. But she kept writing, not because anyone clapped, but because something inside refused to quit. And when her work finally broke through, it wasn't because the world suddenly cared. It was because she stopped needing the world to care and finished the story anyway. Or look at David Goggins. He doesn't run ultramarathons, push his body past its breaking point, or sit in an ice bath at 4 a.m. because someone is cheering for him. He does it because he refuses to outsource his strength. He embodies what Epictetus meant: philosophy as action, not explanation. When you let go of the illusion that others will witness your suffering and give it weight, something extraordinary happens. Disappointment turns into clarity, and clarity is freedom. Freedom from waiting, freedom from begging to be noticed, freedom from the quiet ache of invisibility. The Stoics didn't aim to be untouched by pain. They aimed to be untouched by dependence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And here's the paradox: the moment you stop needing others to care, you actually become more magnetic. Because nothing is more attractive, more powerful, than someone who no longer performs. People sense it. They may not know why, but they pause when you walk in the room. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence carries weight. So the first part of this journey is simple but brutal. Accept the silence. Accept that no one is coming. Accept that your pain, your growth, your transformation is invisible to the world. And instead of resenting it, let it refine you. Because in that silence, you'll hear something louder than the applause of the crowd, your own voice. Not the echo of what others expect, but the deeper voice that whispers, keep going. That's where power begins. Not in being seen, but in choosing to see yourself. The death of expectations, the birth of power. When expectations die, freedom is born. That's the truth the Stoics repeated across centuries, and it's a truth we resist with every fiber of our being. Most of us live inside an invisible contract with the world. If I hurt, someone should notice. If I work hard, someone should reward me. If I am loyal, someone should return the favor. But life rarely signs that contract. And when it doesn't, when no one notices, no one rewards, no one reciprocates, we crumble. Why? Because our expectations were never questioned. We assumed that life would play fair. But the Stoics tell us life is not cruel, it is indifferent. And in that indifference lies our liberation. Marcus Aurelius on the weight of others. Marcus Aurelius warned himself every morning, when you wake up, tell yourself, today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He didn't say this to become cynical. He said it to free himself from false hope. By lowering expectations to match reality, he no longer felt betrayed when people acted according to their flaws. He wasn't surprised when care wasn't given, when loyalty wasn't returned. He already accounted for it. And when you live this way, when you bury the illusion that others will always care, you stop resenting them. You stop living as if the world owes you comfort. And paradoxically, you grow lighter. The illusion of reciprocity. Think about friendships. How often do we believe if I show up for them, they'll show up for me? But then a crisis hits, and suddenly the phone doesn't ring back. It stings because you thought loyalty guaranteed loyalty. But Epictetus cuts through the sting with a single line. When you kiss your friend, say to yourself, tomorrow he may die. Brutal, yes, but liberating. He's reminding us to hold everything lightly, even relationships. To cherish deeply, but without assuming permanence or reciprocity. Because the moment you assume, you've chained your peace to someone else's behavior. And that chain will snap when they fail to deliver. Consider athletes like Serena Williams. She didn't rise to dominance because the tennis world showered her with applause at every step. In fact, much of the time, she faced criticism, dismissal, even hostility. If she had built her identity on the expectation of universal admiration, she would have broken. Instead, she built it on discipline, showing up to practice courts at dawn, training when no one was watching, building an empire not on applause, but on relentless self-respect. Or think of entrepreneurs like Elon Musk. You may love him or despise him, but no one can deny this: he does not wait for permission. He doesn't build companies because the world asked nicely. He doesn't wait for applause to validate his work. He expects resistance, skepticism, even mockery, and then keeps building anyway. That's what the Stoics meant. Expectation dies. Power is born. The first freedom from audience to authority. When you stop expecting others to carry your pain, you begin carrying it differently. Not as a burden that breaks you, but as weight that trains you. Marcus Aurelius again. Do not waste what remains of your life in speculation about your neighbors unless with a view to some mutual benefit. Translation: stop waiting for others to notice your wounds, your struggles, your brilliance. Stop wasting time wondering if they care. The more you stare at the crowd, the less you see yourself. When expectations die, you stop being an actor waiting for applause. You become an architect, building something indestructible. Disappointment transformed. Here's the beauty of it. Disappointment is simply a teacher in disguise. The friend who didn't call back, the family member who didn't support you, the partner who didn't understand. At first, it feels like betrayal. But if you look deeper, it's a gift. Because each disappointment kills an expectation, and each expectation that dies leaves behind clarity. Clarity that people are flawed, distracted, overwhelmed just like you. Clarity that your worth is not measured by how quickly someone texts you back. Clarity that life is not waiting to applaud, but it is waiting to be lived. From victimhood to agency. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you expect the world to validate your pain, you're looking outside, you're dreaming. But when you accept indifference as reality, you turn inward, you awaken. And in that awakening, you realize you are not powerless. You are the only one who has lived every second of your life. You are the only one who knows the storms you've walked through. You are the only one qualified to carry your story with authority. So why keep waiting for others to give it meaning? A modern challenge. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you paused your growth because you were waiting for someone else's permission? Waiting for a boss to notice, a parent to approve, a partner to affirm. What if that permission never comes? Will you freeze forever? Or will you rise and declare yourself ready? Epictetus again. No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom doesn't come from being noticed. It comes from deciding that even if a room is empty, even if no one claps, you will do the work anyway. Let the death of expectations be your rebirth. Mourn it if you must, the fantasy of being rescued, of being endlessly cared for, of being fully understood. Let it die, and then breathe. Because now, in the ashes of those illusions, you stand free. Free not because the world suddenly cares, but because you've stopped needing it to. This is the paradox of Stoicism. The moment you stop demanding care, you begin to care for yourself with a depth you never thought possible. And that is the first real power, unyielding, unbreakable, unborrowed. From performance to presence. We live in an age of constant performance. Every photo, every post, every word feels like a small audition for approval. Even our pain becomes curated, edited into captions, framed for sympathy, packaged for attention. And here's the tragedy: when pain turns into performance, it stops being a path to healing and starts being a show. The Stoics warned us about this long before Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube existed. Epictetus put it simply: don't explain your philosophy, embody it. What he meant is that real growth doesn't need a stage. Real transformation doesn't demand applause. In fact, it often grows best in silence, unseen, unannounced. Most people don't realize how addicted they are to being seen until the attention stops. It's why rejection feels like death. It's why being ignored feels unbearable. Because deep down, We equate visibility with worth. But here's the Stoic truth: the world doesn't hand out medals for endurance. No one's keeping score of how much you've suffered. If you collapse into performance, sharing every wound in the hope that someone will validate you, you end up trapped in an endless cycle: bleed, post, repeat. It looks like healing, but it isn't. It's dependency. It's outsourcing your worth to strangers who scroll past your pain in less than a second. Marcus Aurelius, The Cliff Against the Waves. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled during wars, plagues, and betrayal, wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." He wasn't saying don't feel. He wasn't saying bury your emotions. He was saying don't let your emotions become a spectacle. Feel deeply, but let your presence, not your performance, be the proof. When you embody this, people sense it. They can feel when you've suffered and grown without you needing to parade it. It's not silence out of suppression. It's silence out of sovereignty. The trap of emotional performance. Here's the danger: the world rewards exposure. The more visibly broken you are, the more attention you receive. But not all attention is healing. Much of it is hollow. And if you're not careful, you start performing your wounds to keep that attention alive. Think about reality TV stars who build entire brands around chaos, drama, and public breakdowns. The moment the drama stops, the spotlight fades. So what do? They create more drama. The wound becomes their currency. The pain becomes their product. But what does that do to the soul? It hollows it out, because healing was never the goal. Applause was. Modern examples of presence. Contrast that with Keanu Reeves, universally admired, yet almost invisible on social media. He doesn't perform his private life. He doesn't broadcast his struggles. And yet, when he shows up, whether on screen or in public, his presence speaks volumes. Why? Because it's grounded. Because it isn't trying to be understood. Because it simply is. Or look at someone like Maya Angelou. She lived through unspeakable trauma. Yet she didn't build her life on performing pain. She built it on presence, on words, art, and authenticity that carried weight, not because she begged for validation, but because she stood in her truth without needing the world to clap. The Stoic redefinition of vulnerability. The modern world confuses vulnerability with exposure, but Stoicism redefines it. Vulnerability isn't about sharing everything with everyone. It's about discernment, choosing when to speak, when to remain silent, and who deserves access to your inner world. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Notice he doesn't say prove yourself by narrating your pain. He says face it, live through it. Let the proof be in your presence, not in your performance. When silence becomes power. Something happens when you stop explaining, stop broadcasting, stop needing every emotion to be understood. Silence becomes power. At first, silence feels like abandonment, but slowly, it transforms into clarity. You realize that some parts of your story are sacred precisely because they belong only to you. Some wounds heal best without witnesses. Some growth happens only in solitude. And when you carry your scars quietly, not as a burden, but as proof that you endured, you begin to radiate a different kind of strength. Not loud, not performative, but undeniable. the energy of non-performance. When you walk into a room without needing to prove yourself, people feel it. They can't quite explain it, but they notice. It's the person who doesn't interrupt, but when they finally speak, everyone listens. It's the athlete who doesn't trash talk, but dominates when it matters. It's the friend who doesn't post daily affirmations, but whose calm presence grounds everyone around them. Why? Because energy built in silence always carries more weight than energy built for show. The challenge. Ask yourself how much of what you share, say, or display is truly for your growth and how much is for performance. How much of your healing is really just content creation? How much of your vulnerability is really just seeking applause? The Stoics would challenge you here if you couldn't post it. If no one ever clapped, if no one ever noticed, would you still do the work? Would you still sit with your pain, walk through the fire, and build yourself into something stronger? Because that's the only vulnerability that counts, the kind that exists, even without an audience. Don't perform your philosophy. Live it. Don't parade your wounds. Carry them with dignity. Don't narrate your growth. Embody it. The crowd will always be hungry for drama, for noise, for a show. Let them eat elsewhere. Your life is not a stage, it's a discipline. And when you embrace that, you discover a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen, but cannot be ignored. Rejection, misunderstanding, and the gift of clarity. Rejection cuts deep. Misunderstanding lingers like a bruise. Being overlooked feels like vanishing into thin air. But the Stoics would tell you what feels like loss is often revelation. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach." If that's true, then rejection doesn't strip you of value. It simply shows you where not to search for it. Why rejection hurts so much? We crave belonging. From the moment we're born, acceptance is linked to survival. As adults, that need mutates. It's no longer about food or shelter. It's about identity. To be seen is to feel real. To be rejected feels like erasure. But here's the catch. Much of rejection isn't about you at all. It's about the other person's capacity or lack thereof to perceive depth. Most people can't process complexity. They want easy categories, simple narratives. So when you don't fit, when you're inconvenient, when your depth unsettles them, they step back, and it feels personal. Yet Marcus Aurelius cautions, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." You are the subject, and most people don't know you. Not really. Misunderstood. Not missing. Think of artists like Vincent van Gogh. During his lifetime, he sold only one painting. Critics dismissed him. Society overlooked him. Family misunderstood him. If Van Gogh had equated rejection with worthlessness, his art would have ended with silence. Instead, he painted anyway, alone, unseen, misunderstood. Today, his work is priceless, not because the world suddenly made him worthy, but because he kept going despite its indifference. This is the Stoic principle. Misunderstanding doesn't diminish you, it clarifies where your energy doesn't belong. Rejection as redirection. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but becoming requires rejection. Without rejection, you'd never refine your circle. You'd never recognize which rooms are too small for your truth." Think of relationships. How many times did you think a breakup meant the end of your story? only to realize it was a turning point. The rejection you thought would break you redirected you toward deeper growth, clearer vision, a freer life. Or careers Oprah Winfrey was told early on she wasn't fit for television, fired, dismissed, rejected. Yet that failure redirected her into creating one of the most influential media platforms of all time. The world's no often clears the path for your real yes. The trap of over-explaining. Here's where many fall into a trap when rejected or misunderstood. We scramble to explain ourselves. We plead, defend, clarify, over-justify. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The more energy you waste correcting others, the less energy you invest in building yourself. Imagine trying to convince everyone to see your worth. It's like trying to chase smoke. It vanishes as soon as you grab for it. But when you stand firm in your values, your actions do the speaking. You stop begging to be understood, and you start becoming undeniable. Silence as strategy. Rejection, misunderstanding, and indifference all tempt us into noise. But the Stoic response is silence, not weakness, but strategy. Epictetus put it bluntly. First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Notice, he doesn't say explain to everyone what you would be. He says decide, then live it. Quietly, relentlessly. In silence, you conserve power. In silence, you build presence. In silence, you let results, not arguments, be your proof. Modern examples of Stoic silence. Consider Michael Jordan, cut from his high school basketball team, doubted early in his career. Did he beg his coach to reconsider? Did he waste energy pleading with critics? No. He trained. He worked. He let championships speak louder than explanations. Or think of Malala Yousafzai. When the world tried to silence her, she didn't collapse into outrage. She chose presence over performance. Her resilience, not her anger, turned rejection into a global movement for education. That's the Stoic formula: less explanation, more embodiment, the inner alchemy of rejection. Here's the transformation. Rejection refines you. Every no eliminates a false path. Every misunderstanding exposes where not to place your energy. Every silence shows you that your foundation must be internal, not external. It hurts. Yes, but pain isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's permission to redirect, to grow, to become someone the old world could never recognize. The challenge. Ask yourself what rejection still haunts you. What misunderstanding do you keep replaying, trying to rewrite in your head? What silence feels like abandonment? Now ask, what if those weren't signs of loss, but signs of guidance? What if that rejection saved you from a smaller life? What if being misunderstood freed you from being misdefined? What if silence gave you the space to finally hear yourself? Because that's what the Stoics would say. The obstacle is the way. Rejection is not erasure. It is revelation. Misunderstanding is not failure. It is clarity. Being overlooked is not death. It is freedom. Stop pleading to be understood. Stop wasting energy correcting every false narrative. Stop fearing rejection as if it defines you. Instead, see it as the universe's ruthless but honest compass. Each no points you closer to your real yes. Each closed door carves out space for your becoming. Each silence gives you back to yourself. The world may never fully understand you, but you are not here to be understood. you are here to become. Solitude. From loneliness to liberation. For most of us, solitude feels like punishment. Silence feels like abandonment. Being alone feels like rejection. But for the Stoics, solitude was not exile, it was initiation. Epictetus said it is not things that disturb us, but our judgment of them. Loneliness isn't the problem. Our interpretation of loneliness is, we call it weakness, emptiness, exile. But solitude is none of those things. Solitude is the furnace where illusions burn away and truth emerges. Why we fear being alone. We fear solitude because it leaves us with the one person we can't escape ourselves. No audience, no distractions, no validation, just you and your thoughts. And for many, that's terrifying. Why? Because solitude strips away the masks. It removes the performances. It reveals how much of our identity has been built on being seen, approved, mirrored back. Without that mirror, we ask, who am I? Really, Marcus Aurelius warned himself against this fear. In his Meditations, he wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He saw solitude not as punishment, but as sanctuary. The difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is running from the world. Solitude is running deeper into yourself. Isolation is avoidance. Solitude is confrontation. When you isolate, you numb. You hide from responsibilities. But when you embrace solitude, you face the unhealed parts of yourself, the doubts, the fears, the insecurities, and you transform them. Think of meditation. To the untrained, sitting alone in silence feels unbearable. The mind screams, distracts, drags you back into noise. But with time, that silence becomes clarity. The noise subsides, and you begin to hear the voice beneath the one that doesn't need applause to be real. Modern echoes of solitude. Consider Steve Jobs. Many of his breakthroughs came not in meetings, but in solitude, long walks, quiet retreats, moments when no one was clapping. The iPhone wasn't born in the noise of the crowd. It was born in stillness, in the inner dialogue of a man who dared to listen to himself. Or think of Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, cut off from the world. Many would have crumbled under that silence, but Mandela used solitude as transformation. He emerged not bitter, but sharper, steadier, more grounded than ever before. His solitude became his training ground. The alchemy of stillness. Something remarkable happens when you sit alone long enough. Solitude stops feeling like emptiness and starts feeling like presence. At first, silence screams, but over time, it softens. You begin to separate your intuition from your insecurity. You distinguish your voice from the world's noise. You start to see how many of your fears weren't even yours, how much of your identity was borrowed from others' expectations. Seneca said we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And solitude proves this. Alone, you watch imagined disasters play out in your head, and then you realize most of them dissolve when confronted. You see that fear was a shadow, not a substance. The power that solitude builds. When you learn to be alone, something shifts. You stop saying yes just to avoid disappointing people. You stop chasing conversations that drain you. You stop filling silence with noise just to avoid yourself. You discover that no is not cruelty, it's clarity. You realize that boundaries are not rejection, they are self-respect. This kind of strength can't be faked. It's why some people enter a room and command attention without saying a word. They've built something in solitude that radiates outward. Solitude as preparation. Solitude is not where life ends, it's where it deepens. It prepares you for the noise, the crowds, the misunderstandings. Because when you know yourself in silence, the world's opinions lose their grip. Carl Jung said the man who looks outside dreams. The man who looks inside awakes. Solitude is the awakening. It is the training ground where you stop being a guest in your own mind and become the architect of it. A modern challenge. Here's the challenge: when was the last time you truly sat with yourself? Without distractions. No phone, no music, no scrolling. Just you. Try it. You'll notice how quickly your mind demands escape. You'll feel the pull toward noise. That's not weakness, that's conditioning. The world has trained you to fear your own presence. But when you lean in instead of running, you reclaim something rare: sovereignty over your own mind. Solitude is not loneliness. It is liberation. It is not exile, it is return. Not weakness, but strength. The Stoics didn't fear being unseen. They feared being untrue to themselves. And solitude was their path to truth. When you stop seeing silence as abandonment and start seeing it as alignment, you become untouchable. You carry a center the world cannot shake, because it was forged in the only place applause cannot reach within. The death of the old self. There comes a quiet turning point in every life when the version of you that once felt essential begins to fall apart. It doesn't collapse with a dramatic explosion. It erodes slowly, like stone wearing down under centuries of water. You try to hold on, but the old self grows heavier every day. The old self was built on applause, on pleasing, on bending to fit into rooms too small for your truth, on rehearsing words just to be liked. That self got you here. It learned the lessons, absorbed the wounds, carried the burdens, but its time is over. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Sometimes, what stands in the way isn't the world. It's you, your old self, your outdated identity. And letting it fall away is not failure. It's evolution. The exhaustion of pretending. You know the feeling. You keep trying to be the version of yourself others expect, smiling when you want to rest, performing when you want to be silent, bending when you want to stand firm. Eventually, it drags, it stiffens, it rots. Carl Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. The old self doesn't need your hatred. It needs your acceptance, your willingness to admit this no longer fits. That's not rebellion, that's release. The people around you will notice. They'll say, you've changed. You seem colder. You're not as fun anymore. What they mean is, you've stopped making yourself available for emotional labor you never consented to. And yes, it unnerves them. Because when you stop bending, you stop being predictable. When you stop performing, you stop being controllable. Your silence, once mistaken for weakness, becomes strength. But here's the truth, you're not colder. You're clearer. You've simply stopped rehearsing. Think of Malcolm X. Before becoming the figure we know, he was Detroit Red, a hustler, gambler, and prisoner. That version of himself had to die for Malcolm X to emerge. Without shedding that skin, his voice, his power, his clarity would never have been born. Or look at Michelle Obama. She could have stayed in the shadow of her husband, content with being the first lady. Instead, she shed that expected identity and became a force in her own right through books, initiatives, and her authentic voice. She stopped fitting into the mold and began breaking it. Growth always requires loss. But the loss isn't you. It's the mask you outgrew. The discipline of shedding. The Stoics teach us that rebirth isn't flashy. It's quiet. It's not an Instagram announcement or a public declaration. It's a slow withdrawal from what no longer serves you. Seneca put it this way: every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. You don't need to announce the end. You don't need to beg others to understand it. You simply begin to live differently. And the difference becomes impossible to ignore. It's in the boundaries you set. It's in the silence you protect. It's in the presence you carry. What people don't see. They don't see the nights you doubted everything, the moments you wanted to explain yourself but chose to evolve instead, the private battles you fought to dismantle the version of yourself that kept you small. They only see the shift, the new steadiness in your voice, the calm refusal to be baited, the absence of your old performances. And because they don't understand, they label it cold, arrogant, distant, but you don't owe them understanding. The people who truly see you won't ask for explanations. The ones who don't were never meant to walk with this next version of you anyway. Here's the challenge: will you cling to the old self because it keeps others comfortable? Or will you release it so you can finally breathe? The old self may have been necessary. It helped you survive. But survival is not the same as living. And the moment you stop clinging, you step into something deeper: authenticity. Modern example of rebirth. Consider Kobe Bryant. He began as the Black Mamba, a persona he crafted to deal with pressure, criticism, and expectation. But later in life, he shed even that, embracing a softer side as a storyteller, father, and mentor. The death of oneself gave birth to another, each time clearer, truer, freer. Rebirth is never once. It happens again and again, if you let it. So let the old self die. Don't drag it forward. Don't rehearse it for the comfort of others. Don't condemn it, thank it. Then release it. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe apologies. You owe yourself freedom, because every ending opens a path. And when you shed the skin that no longer fits, you don't become less, you become whole. The old self was the mask. The new self is the mountain, still, watchful, unmoved. Quiet power. The strength that doesn't perform. We've been taught to think power is loud. That influence requires charisma. That respect demands dominance. That presence means commanding the spotlight. But the Stoics knew otherwise. True power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. True power is quiet. Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. He didn't say explain it. He didn't say convince the world. He said decide, then embody it. That's quiet power, choosing who you are, then living it without performance. The illusion of loud power. Modern culture glorifies loudness. Social media amplifies this illusion. The louder you are, the more followers you gain, the more outrageous your display, the more attention you attract. But attention isn't the same as respect. Noise isn't the same as weight. Look around. The people who truly command a room rarely demand it. They don't need to announce their presence, it's felt. Why? Because presence built on inner stillness radiates more force than any performance. Marcus Aurelius, authority without noise. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. Armies obeyed him, nations depended on him. History still remembers him. Yet in his private journal, he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He wasn't interested in convincing people of his virtue. He was interested in embodying it, quietly, consistently, without performance. That's why his meditations still resonate today, not because they were written for an audience, but because they were written in silence. Modern examples of quiet power. Think of Rosa Parks. She didn't lead with speeches or crowds or spectacle. She led with one quiet act, refusing to give up her seat. That silence shook the nation louder than any noise could have. Or take Keanu Reeves again. In an industry built on attention, he radiates presence by refusing to perform. Stories circulate of him giving up his subway seat, of him quietly donating millions to charity. He doesn't broadcast. He doesn't explain. He simply lives aligned with his values, and the world notices. That's quiet power, magnetic because it's not hungry. Detachment as strength. People confuse detachment with disinterest, but Stoic detachment is clarity. It's the ability to care deeply without clinging desperately. It's showing up fully without needing control over the outcome. When you stop being baited by flattery or criticism, when you stop explaining every move, when you stop performing your worth, you become immovable. And immovable people command respect, not because they demand it, but because they radiate it. Seneca put it best. The greatest empire is to rule oneself. That empire is quiet, but unshakable. The energy of self-mastery. Think about it. Who do you trust more, the person who needs to constantly tell you they're strong, or the one whose actions prove it without a word? The athlete who doesn't trash talk but dominates anyway. The leader who doesn't posture but delivers when it counts. The friend who doesn't flood you with empty promises but shows up when you need them. That's the energy of self-mastery. It doesn't explain. It doesn't perform. It simply is. Here's the challenge. Can you stop chasing recognition long enough to build something real? Can you sit in the silence long enough to embody your values without needing applause? Can you let your presence, not your performance, speak for you? Because the truth is this: when you stop performing, you start becoming. And when you start becoming, people notice, not because you demanded attention, but because you no longer need it. The Stoic paradox. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That's the paradox of Stoicism. You give others space to be flawed, while holding yourself to a standard so high it doesn't need validation. Quiet power doesn't ask, will they notice? It asks, am I aligned with my values? And that alignment carries more weight than any spotlight ever could. Consider Barack Obama. Whether you agree with his politics or not, his presence is undeniable. He doesn't shout to control a room. He pauses. He breathes. He speaks less, but his words carry more. That's not performance, it's presence built on inner steadiness. Or Serena Williams. Her dominance wasn't loud trash talk, it was quiet preparation, relentless discipline, unshakable presence on the court. She didn't need to explain her greatness. She embodied it. So stop chasing loudness. Build quiet power. Don't measure your worth by how much noise you can make. Measure it by how deeply aligned you are with your values. You don't need to announce your change. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to perform your strength. You simply live it. And that kind of presence, the presence that doesn't beg to be seen but radiates anyway, is the rarest and most magnetic force in the world. Quiet power doesn't compete with the spotlight. It carries its own light. The return to self, where everything changes. There is a strange kind of freedom that arrives the moment you stop needing the world to care. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in pieces through disappointment, through solitude, through rejection, through silence. At first it feels like loss, but slowly it becomes clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the final truth. You are never powerless. You are only distracted waiting for permission, applause, recognition, rescue. The moment you stop waiting, you begin. The trap of outsourcing care. We are taught from childhood that care equals safety. Someone feeds us, shelters us, soothes us. As adults, we confuse that with meaning. We think if no one sees me, I must not matter. If no one cares, I must not exist. But the Stoics stripped that illusion bare. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Care from others is not weakness, but depending on it is. Because the world is fickle. Attention shifts. People come and go. If your foundation is their care, your life will always shake. The turning point is when you stop craving emotional resources from others and start becoming your own source. You no longer hand out pieces of yourself in exchange for temporary comfort. You no longer beg for someone else to define your worth. You no longer fold when applause fades. Instead, you build yourself brick by brick. Discipline, clarity, resilience, integrity, not in performance, in silence, not for approval, for alignment. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That's the final challenge, to accept all of it. The strength, the weakness, the longing, the disappointment, the unmet needs. To stop waiting for the world to fix them and finally take ownership of them. Look at Maya Angelou. She endured trauma, silence, misunderstanding. For years, she didn't speak. Yet out of that silence came a voice that shook generations. She didn't wait for the world to care. She became her own foundation, and from that foundation came poetry, activism, power. Or think of David Goggins again. Nobody cared when he was overweight, broke, and lost. Nobody came to drag him out of his despair. But he stopped waiting. He became his own rescue. His discipline, his calloused mind, became a blueprint for millions, not because he was seen, but because he stopped needing to be. That's what happens when you return to yourself. You become undeniable. The gift of being unshakable. When you stop outsourcing your identity, you stop being fragile. Love can come and go, but you remain. Applause can rise and fade, but you remain. People can misunderstand, reject, abandon, overlook, but you remain. That's not detachment from life. That's engagement on your own terms. You love because you choose to, not because you need it to define you. You work because it matters, not because someone claps. You grow because it's who you are, not because the world is watching. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And the greatest waste is waiting for others to validate what you already know. Waiting for permission to live, waiting for applause to act. Stop waiting. Life is not in their hands, it's in yours. So ask yourself, what are you still waiting for? A parent's approval, a partner's affirmation, a boss's recognition, a crowd's applause. What if it never comes? Will you keep freezing your life? Or will you rise now, with nothing but your own will, and say, "This is mine, this life is mine"? Because that's where everything changes. The day you stop waiting to be cared for is the day you start caring for yourself so fiercely, so relentlessly, that nothing can shake you. This is what the Stoics knew. The world is indifferent. People are distracted. Care is fleeting, but your mind, your choices, your inner citadel, that is yours. Marcus Aurelius, again. Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. Don't argue. Don't explain. Don't perform. Just be. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly. When you do that, you stop being at the mercy of the world's noise. You become the mountain in the storm, the cliff against the waves, the steady flame in a room full of smoke, the return to yourself. The place where silence no longer feels like abandonment, but like home. The place where solitude doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. The place where rejection doesn't define you, it refines you. When you stop needing the world to care, you stop being fragile, you stop being dependent, you stop being movable. And in that moment, you become something unshakable. Not because the world finally saw you, but because you finally saw yourself. That's the Stoic paradox. You don't need to be seen to become great. You don't need to be understood to become whole. You don't need to be cared for to become powerful. The moment you accept no one cares is the moment everything changes, because it's the moment you stop waiting and start living. And now, we've reached the quiet close of tonight's journey. You've seen that the world's indifference is not a curse, but a teacher. No one is coming, and that is not your downfall, but your freedom. For in that silence, you found your own voice. In that absence, you discovered your own strength. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. And tonight, you've remembered that truth. The applause may never come. The understanding may never arrive. But still you rise. You continue. You keep becoming. So as you step back into your own life, hold this image gently. You are like the steady flame, small yet unwavering, unbothered by whether the room notices its light. It shines because it was made to shine. And so do you. If these words stirred something in you, if you felt your own strength awakening in the stillness, I invite you to subscribe channel, to share your reflections at comment, or simply to whisper a quiet vow to yourself. Not for me, but for you. Rest now. You've earned this stillness. Whisper to yourself, I am enough, and let the quiet carry you home. Good night. Sweet dreams.